Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Thank you for joining Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast on the Nerd Party Network that is dedicated to exploring all of the nooks and crannies of a galaxy far, far away and possibly other galaxies farther and farther away, too. Who knows? I am one of your hosts, the humble Jedi Master John Mills, and joining me, as I demand, no, as I absolutely force him to do on a regular basis, is Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you enjoying your time in servitude to my whims, for I have commanded you to be here?
Well, I don't know where you've gotten up with this big head of yours. I guess you must think yourself some sort of Palpatine or something like that. But dude, you're not even like Padawan level right now. So give it a break, man. Give it a break.
Interesting. I really find that interesting. But what I also find interesting is that we could always use some more reviews over on Apple Podcasts. So amble on over there, everybody. Give us some 5-star rating and review. And if you do, we will personally dispatch all of our love and affection through the airwaves right in your direction. And you can, of course, find us on X, Twitter X, at the Jedi Masters. You can find the network at Join Nerd Party, and you can find the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And even though there are thousands of other options on social media, we're all too busy and too tired to be on any more of them. So we appreciate you. Please find us there if you can. And of course, thenerdparty.com/contact. We'd love to interact with you over there as well. Now, this is one of the trademark surprise topics, and it's something I was pondering because of the series Ahsoka. And it has to do with something that is a little bit of a quibble, but it's an odd one. And it's something that for some reason my brain has really fixated on, Matt. Now, we all know that the Jedi Council does not bequeath upon Anakin Skywalker the rank of Master. And that irks him somewhat in Episode 3. He's outraged by it, in fact. However, he has had a Padawan. This Padawan called him Master. Thrawn himself refers to Anakin as Ahsoka's Master. So what is it that would prevent him from being a Master? Obviously, not every Jedi Master is on the Council, and not everybody on the Council has been a Jedi Master, so far as we know from expanded universe stuff. So what criteria am I missing here? Shouldn't Anakin have been irked several years prior to the fact that they didn't give him the rank of Master? He's had a Padawan. He's been a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that Star Wars hasn't really answered ever as to what makes somebody go from a Jedi Knight to being a Jedi Master. Because Obi-Wan Kenobi is, of course, taken up the rank from Padawan to Jedi Knight. And then he's given Anakin as a Padawan, but that doesn't immediately make him a Master. And so I think that's, we don't actually have a story, I don't think, anywhere as to when Obi-Wan transcends from Jedi Knight to Jedi Master. He just is at the level of Master by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith. And so
is one of the criteria that your Padawan has to become a Knight?
Is that a
possibility?
That could be a possibility, which means that Anakin would never have been able to become a Master because Ahsoka leaves the Order and therefore never becomes a Knight. So I think that is a really interesting question, though, to ask. And I'm sure, you could probably go on, Wikipedia and kind of read about things that maybe done in the EU, or maybe they're being somewhere in the comics as to what it is that creates a Jedi Master. But it almost seems to me the difference between, to kind of take it in a religious sense, being a priest and then, being something like a bishop, and then a bishop puts you in the place to possibly become, a cardinal, And that, you know, so there's all these different levels that you have throughout specifically the Catholic Church. And it seems like the Jedi Order kind of has that same level type of system, and that there's something that would, and maybe it's a level of enlightenment in the Force. You know, maybe it's just the will of the Council who elevates people to master level, which then gives them the ability to be people that would be considered to be someone you might have sit on the Jedi Council then. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a really interesting question.
I like the fact that you go for the hierarchy of the priesthood, because that is an important distinction where there are certain responsibilities, where it literally is a rank, if you will. But at the core, it's the same role. It's just one has more bureaucratic responsibility. And that would likely seem to get at why the Jedi, more than any other religious order you might look at in a fantasy setting, should have stayed out of the bureaucratic business to begin with. But that then begs the question of how would the rank of master or the designation of Jedi Master have been achieved in the less orderly days when there were simply practitioners out there, when it was a little bit more the way people imagined it was before the prequels came about, where you would have a Jedi over here, or I guess what you would have called in the Ahsoka series, Boken Jedi, where they're just out there being Jedi. How do they, like, was it a term that even existed before the Order came about, I guess would be the question. Or it simply, or would people simply have been Jedi, no knight, no master, just Jedi was the only necessary appellation for what you were?
It does seem like that there is something to age with it, because, you know, and Anakin's complaining about the fact that, you know, he's not being made a master. You know, Obi-Wan mentions that being on the council at his age is an incredible honor. And so that, based off of, you know, of course, species, right? You know, Yoda lives much longer than, say, Anakin or Obi-Wan. That there is some sort of like experience level based off of age that may, you know, kind of get you to the master level. So you've been a Jedi Knight for a certain amount of time. As long as you're seen as somebody who's, you know, truly following the tenets of the Jedi Order and the will of the Force, then perceived by the Council, you would be, you know, you would transcend from one level to the next. You know, it's interesting too, because, you know, we just rewatched, had some people over and we rewatched episode 1, and, you know, Obi-Wan says, you know, you would be on the Council if you would just be obedient, basically. And so it seems to be that, you know, Qui-Gon Jinn is not just a Jedi Knight, but he is a Jedi Master, and that he could be elevated even higher if he would be obedient. You know, if he would be seen as following the unwritten rules of the Jedi Order in some ways. I feel like that's almost what he's breaking, and so therefore that's where the issue comes in. But
is it a possibility here that we've accidentally given a headcanon reason? If we bring in the quasi-official backstory of Qui-Gon, because I don't know if that got wiped away when Disney threw away the old EU or not. I think we agree that the prequel era EU seems to have survived relatively-ish intact. And we know that Qui-Gon, because we've been reading the Jedi Apprentice series, had a student before Obi-Wan. So if we say, well, your Padawan has to graduate to Knight, then you wound up answering why he wouldn't have been a Jedi Master, because he hasn't had anybody ascend to knighthood yet. Obi-Wan's still on his way, and Xanatos is his first student who falls to the dark side, but I don't think he ever became a knight. So maybe that is really the distinction, is you have to see a student all the way through. But again, it seems like such a bureaucratic distinction.
What you're saying there, though, in some ways does make sense, because when you think about this idea, they say that one of the best ways to be able to learn something is to be able to teach it. Mm-hmm. And so it would almost make sense as to why the Jedi Order then would require somebody to have brought somebody to full completion of their own Jedi Knight journey to then be able to be a master. Because then becoming a Jedi Knight is your undergraduate degree, but becoming a Jedi Master is being able to teach somebody else to get their undergraduate degree.
But they would have, and again, this speaks to the bureaucratic nature of it, they would have that alternate path to being a master could be being placed on the Jedi Council, because maybe the Force never called somebody to be a teacher, but they've been long enough. And so Anakin understands previously why he isn't being given the rank of master is because Ahsoka left. That stings, but okay. And then he's given the opportunity to be put on the council. And since there's a limited number of people who can be on the council, then Anakin, that would explain why Anakin is like, oh, yes, this is my shot to be a master, is to get on the council. And then they say, but we're not going to give you that rank. So basically the two different ways he could get it, he's now been robbed of it a second time. And the thing is, if we go with this explanation, that makes his indignation, that makes it sting a little bit more. I kind of like the headcanon we're building right here, that the ambition in Anakin is he thought he found an alternate way to get what he wanted, and it gets taken away from him again.
Well, and I think that actually what you're saying actually speaks to that idea, because one of the things that Windu says and the council itself says is that you're on this council, but we're not giving you the rank of master. And so, it's because their hand obviously is being forced by the Supreme Chancellor at this moment, and they don't have the resources to fight a two-front war. And in fact, they see this as an opportunity, hopefully, to keep it from being a two-front war by quickly ending any threats from the Chancellor's office through Anakin. And what's interesting is that if Anakin actually followed through, he would have been made a Jedi Master.
Yes.
If he had helped them capture Sidious, he would have been made a Jedi Master. He would have proven himself to be loyal to the Jedi Code and what the Jedi stand for. And instead, of course, he gets trapped in emotion and he gets trapped in possession.
And it makes it even more, not tragic, but even more, I don't know whether ironic or not, because that the headcanon I subscribe to is that the line in the original Star Wars that I've argued with a number of friends where he says, when I left you, I was but the learner, now I am the master. Vader is supposed to be, he's like, I'm on the Death Star. Death Star is operational. Guess what? I'm going to take over. I'm going to become the Sith Lord. I'm going to become Emperor of the universe now. I am, the Force is on my side. And so both in Star Wars and Empire, he's got two more shots at becoming, in the case of the Sith, the Master, and he fails at those too. So it's a really interesting legacy of denial for him. He just keeps trying the wrong way to get what he wants. But then, of course, he winds up, making good and having one heck of a cameo appearance in the Ahsoka series.
And I do think that that's the interesting thing, is that through that whole sequence is that he actually, I think, finally is able to be the person he was always could have been if he had made the right choices. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of that whole sequence, and therefore allows us almost to have a fully realized arc for Anakin Skywalker. And I think this is just one of the reasons why, I've railed against the sequels for so long because of their inability and unwillingness to use Force ghosts the way they should have. Because the whole point of becoming a Force ghost was to be able to impact what was happening in the physical world from the outside. Like you were still like that was the whole point of that. And so never using that is frustrating, but I think, we see Filoni just perfectly utilize what Force Ghost could be, and it allows Anakin that almost full redemption, right? Because he's not only completed the task that had been set before him by Yoda all those years ago in the Clone Wars, but he's helped Ahsoka overcome her own demons, right? And finally, I think, in many ways, fulfill who she can be in a fully realized way. And so it's almost like, he's able to transcend to master in the Force that way. And so, I think it's really interesting, though, the idea of what would be able to create somebody to be a master, because I think the other question that does, get to me in this then is what specifically, if somebody never had a Padawan, what would their service need to be, or what type of person would they need to be able to transcend to master? Would it be their understanding of the Force? I mean, would that I think raises a lot of really interesting questions, because there have to be Jedi that have never trained a Padawan because that was not what they felt called to do through the will of the Force. But
Jedi like a Jedi like that, first and foremost, I think that there's a compulsion among anybody that studies a subject to become a teacher in some respect.
Yeah, but I think
the compulsion to share your knowledge, I think, is an innately human.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Mon Calamari and Ishi Tibian and all of those, but it's an innately human thing to want to share your knowledge with people.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that a selfless sharing of the knowledge is the trick. But I think that, to your point about not taking a student, you could make an argument that, for instance, Ezra, living what is very obviously the example of a Jedi life out in the wild, still being who he is and modeling a good life that is with the people of that planet, almost like a missionary, I would think you could wind up being designated a rank of master. But I think that I would rather flip that around and say somebody like Ezra out there living the life doesn't care about the rank anymore. He doesn't even care about being a knight. It's not about that. It's about being in tune with the Force. And it's all, I would argue that it's almost like, in a sense, ideally, somebody who becomes a quote unquote Jedi Master would be the person who's not seeking it at all. And it's just something that the Force would wind up bestowing upon them, in a sense, because at the end they would understand that the rank doesn't matter, and it never would matter.
Well, I think that you just answered a great question in what I asked. I think you answered the question in the sense that I think what would allow somebody to transcend from knight to master is humility. Like being a Jedi of complete humility and never thinking of yourself more than you ought. Always thinking of others first, the purity of the Jedi code, right? In that sense. And I think that's exactly, you would be able to have Jedi that maybe, they didn't have a Padawan. Maybe, they worked in the temple training younglings and that was their job. So they never actually had the opportunity, or maybe they were a Jedi who you could almost see Qui-Gon going down this road of studying the mysteries of the Force in depth, around the galaxy, and not having a Padawan because he's always on the move. And, but yet there's a deep sense of humility that the Council recognizes, and therefore that sense of being and recognition of one's being would then allow the Council to be able to say, yes, you should be a master because of that. And I think then you might actually even see that person be sought out by other Jedi to learn from, even if it wasn't specific,
right,
master apprentice role. So, I think that's something that, just these are all things that you could totally dig into. And I think this is also one of the things that the sequels, unfortunately, I think fail out in many ways too, is that we never got this type of discussion of Luke trying to figure out, what was the right path to move forward in creating a new Jedi Order, because it seems like that would be something that would be heavy on Luke's heart to make sure he did not repeat the sins of the past. And, so it's just one more place where that kind of fails. But I think, again, as we were talking about, Ahsoka seems to be touching on, Rebels seem to touch on, and I think it's an incredibly beautiful thing to be able to see some of those questions being answered in interesting, subtle ways. And it's one of those places where, if you're telling the story right, it answers questions you didn't even know you had. And that's the beauty of something like, the Rebel series or what we're getting in Ahsoka. So,
well, being the person who likes to do bad comedy in my brain, I also envision, say, Obi-Wan dies and his ghost is freed and he shows up on Dagobah and he's like, "Yo, what's up, Yoda? I'm a ghost now." And Yoda looks at him and says, "Happy to talk to you, I am. Given the way things went, you're not a master anymore. You're a Jedi Knight. I want to get that straight with you right now, punk. Anakin might have never finished training, but I wish you hadn't finished training. You finishing training ruined everything." Like, I would love to see like an argument like that between Obi-Wan and Yoda. And then Obi-Wan could flip it around and be like, "Oh, really? Oh, really? Do we want to talk about Dooku? Guess what? You're not a Jedi Master either." Right? And it's just, so it's like something you could revoke. So in their darker moments, they're pulling the rank of master away from each other.
Oh man. Yeah. I think it would be interesting and kind of funny almost to have like a comedy bit of the two just sitting on, a log in this Force spirit realm, just shooting the crap with each other and bickering back and forth or whatever. Yeah, it could be pretty funny. So.
Oh man, no, you could actually have a short series where the two of them are like walking through the world between worlds. And then like they happen across those portals where historical events are happening. And Yoda's like, "Oh, see this? I wish to." And Obi-Wan looks and he's like, No, keep moving. I'm going down to this one. I don't even want to see this one, because it's like flashes of his life of like, the chase of Zam Wessel on Coruscant. And Obi-Wan's like, no.
I was picturing them more like, the Peanut Gallery and the Muppets, the old guys.
Oh, Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah.
Oh, now that's
wouldn't that be funny? Those two, like
just want to see.
Just like making fun of future Jedi.
Yes.
Like you just.
Yes. Well, see, then you have. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
I could go in a lot of interesting places. But you know what else can go in a lot of interesting places? It's reaching out to you online and giving you crap about all of these ideas that we're discussing. So, Matt, where can people reach out to you, find you out there in the netherworld of the internet force?
Yes. Well, you can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. So just try the different social media platforms. You'll find me there if I'm there. You can also find me here, of course, on this network talking about Harry Potter. Each and every chapter, one chapter at a time on Owl Post with Dre Kaufman. You can also find me over on the TFM network with a bunch of shows. You can find me in the 602 Club talking about all of the franchises we love outside of Star Trek. You can also find me talking a lot of Star Trek and literary treks, The Orb, Warp 5, Saddle Up, and Strange New Worlds. But John, maybe people want to pitch their art for our wonderful idea of Obi-Wan and Yoda. Where would they be able to find you?
Well, gosh, you can find me out there as Kessel Junkie out in the wilds of the internet, unable to quit X. Even if it changes its name to Y, I'll still be there. And you can find me right here on the network, co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where we look at the work of directors and blah, 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 all of that stuff. We have a really good time on that. And won't you join us and have a good time too? But speaking of good times, I think that they are serving some Corellian brandy over at the Jedi Temple cafeteria, Matt. So why don't we go ahead and close these negotiations?
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.